Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is, boy, oh boy, I didn't write the date down. April what?
Ninth.
April 9th, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank Kathy Siegel Garcia for introducing me to today's guest, Wayne Edward Peet. Where in the heck you calling in from, Wayne?
Mar Vista.
Mar Vista, that's so cool, right near me in Venice. The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Probably to feel useful, to be, you know, part of something that you feel is positive and, useful for everybody.
I like it. Very good. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Um, a variety of stuff. I mean, I scan the LA Times. I look at the Apple News feed. Um, in terms of news type of stuff. Other stuff, I've always relied on people that I know to turn me on to uh, things that are interesting or of interest.
Yeah, like word of mouth.
Yeah,
Yeah. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
well, it's just part of our journey of trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. But do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate.
Yeah.
There's a curiosity. Yeah. I mean, you can see it in animals as well. You know,
Yeah.
you put a cat in a new environment, it's going to start checking out different things and see
Yeah.
what's going on.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Those are so interrelated. Um, I think emotions are probably more primal than
Yeah.
thoughts. I noticed in dreams, uh, the thing that'll wake me up out of a dream is like a sudden rush of extreme emotion in the dream of various types of emotions, but like a kind of an overloaded big emotion will wake me up.
Yeah.
And those kind of things just seem to come, no matter what the context text of the dream, whether it's just, you know, love or fear or any number of emotions.
That was good, man. I rarely get that thought about it being more primal. I wonder. I think most people wake up out of dreams because some emotional kind of primal thing, not a logical linear thing. So that was good. Um, Fill in the blank, Wayne. I don't know what I think until I
Check something out uh, in more detail, maybe,
yeah. McLuhan
or
says I
try
don't know.
not to rush to judgment on things without
Yeah.
having, some kind of context about it.
Right. You mean like research, get a bigger picture view. Because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. So I do get that. I don't know what I think until I check it out with more details, like research it. Really good. Can humans think without language?
Yes, I think so. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, babies think, even before they've learned language.
Yeah. Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
You mean could you give me more?
Yeah,
Am I
like
in the
you're out,
context of I
yeah,
have to
you
respond to
yeah,
somebody or what?
yeah, like you're at the store and the clerk and you can't communicate with the clerk, or just basic communication breakdown. What's your usual route?
Try to rephrase it
Yeah,
um, in a way that I try to vibe out the person and see why they're not getting it, and then
yeah,
uh, in a more technical situation, because I'm an audio engineer as well, so sometimes I'm mixing or mastering with people that maybe don't have the technical uh, knowledge that other people might, so you have to, I've always found like metaphor or try to find something that they'll relate to,
yeah,
that I can kind of rephrase it in terms of something like it's like this when you do this,
right.
and that'll sometimes work because it's a little esoteric just to be saying, things about frequencies and whatnot, to somebody that's not thinking in that kind of way.
Well, metaphor is a great word for it. And this is, we sort of covered this, but your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Well, I think the feeling will always uh, win out.
Yeah,
I mean, there's always a struggle to try to keep things rational,
yeah.
um, as we can see by the political situation now. Uh,
Yikes. So these are
it's
two, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna finish that up. It's just the feeling thing is just people just go right there. You know,
Yeah. These are two from Alan Turing in the 1950s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
I don't know. I don't think it's a function of it. I think the soul is there, and that thinking is kind of like your own individual construct that you've developed.
Right.
Uh,
The second Turing question is, can machines think?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I don't really even think in those terms.
That's what I'm
I just,
after.
but I just pursue. I pursue getting things done. Doing things. I'm more of a simpleton.
No, I wouldn't say that's simpleton. I'd say that's smart. In fact, that's what it is. It's Wayne, it's me and you versus the wording on the questions. So I
Mm,
appreciate when you go, I don't even think in those terms. You reminded me immediately of, do you know Thomas Nordegg? He's like the greatest guitar tech ever. He worked,
no.
anyways, he worked for Frank Zappa, Steve Vai,
Uh,
Ingve, everybody. And he's just such a great guy. And when I say, I'm not asking you this question, but of the 5W questions, what's the most important? Why, what, who, when, or where? He goes, when? Like, let's get this done. You guys are like, you do the job and you know how to do it. And I appreciate that. Does the
Well,
brain more,
also, the older you get, the more you realize you don't have unlimited amount of time.
ah,
And
exactly.
I've seen too many people that I know that have great ideas and they talk about it forever, but they never actually do it,
Do it.
and it doesn't count if you don't do it, you know?
Well, we're born about the same year. I was born in 53. You're born in 54. So I know what
54.
you're talking about. What's fat? No, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I think it's both, but I probably lean toward detect detecting
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
because your subconscious. I mean, again, go back to like dreams. It's just kind of doing what it wants to do in a certain way, you know, and
Yeah.
you can control aspects in your dreams, but not completely. It's not like you're writing a story and you can completely control everything.
Yeah, that's Tim. Tim Leary says if you learn how to lucid dream for 6 minutes after your body dies, your brain keeps working and you can sort of guide your path for a little. It's like it sounds good, but it's like if when you sit down to take a nap in the middle of the afternoon, you can kind of, oh, return me to that countryside, flowery hillside so I can, zone out. But yeah, I don't think that's interesting. You can't really control where your dream's going. Like, what in the heck takes you and goes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who's writing that
Well,
screenplay?
I can get back. I mean, if I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, I can kind of get back into the same
Yeah,
dream after,
yeah,
but it's not like I'm controlling it exactly. It's not
yeah.
like you're coming back from a commercial break on a TV show or something.
And you're writing the screenplay. Okay, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I don't know how you would measure that because we're
Yeah.
stuck inside of our own brain at the speed of that. And I mean, you can measure the speed of light, but that's exterior. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. The poet Audre Lorde said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, "Oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?"
Well, I think, I mean, Ron Shelton, the director who I've worked for and known a long time, used to say stuff about making big budget movies that you're taking the king's money to do the project, but the trick is to actually do something that's not just what they might expect.
Yeah,
So it's about a certain kind of subversion
that is
of
great. What new tool do you
what's going
suggest?
on. Yeah.
Yeah, what new tool do you suggest? Subversive art, subversion. That's my kind of, that's what I like. Because people, when I say tool, they kind of think tangible, but subverting, that's beautiful. What new toy do you suggest?
You mean in terms of an actual thing, toy?
Again, it can be, you can drop the word new if you want. It's really what toy do you gravitate towards? It doesn't have to be tangible or
Well, to kind of digress a little bit about my journey and process, I've I'm kind of self-taught. I mean, I'm educated musically uh, since I was a kid and went through a bachelor's degree in music. But in terms of engineering, sound, audio engineering, I'm completely self-taught. And have developed kind of by doing, starting with very low budget stuff and then gradually using the money I make to buy better stuff and then kind of building up. But I've always been kind of committed to trying to make things um, better than what you might expect for the budget.
Yeah.
And um, I find I'm very fascinated with. I've been very fascinated with various aspects of music, but in terms of engineering, it's like pop and rock kind of engineering, and I've thought that the better you can make the sound of something that's more avant-garde, say, uh, it's just a better framing of the same content.
Yeah.
There was a kind of movement of the really free jazz stuff of people that just wanted to make it the recording also just sound. They weren't even trying. They just didn't really pursue any kind of excellence in the
Yeah.
recording because they believed in the music, and then somehow the aesthetic kind of got that it can't sound good sonically. I don't mean music,
Yeah.
because that would somehow make it commercial or something, even though
Yeah.
it's the same content. I feel that presenting it with a good recording just can only help frame the same content. It's
Yeah.
not making it more commercial to record it well.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, no.
so
Yeah.
that's kind of a roundabout thing, but I kind of believe in trying to, achieve as good of a quality as possible
Yeah.
within your budget, without being like a snob. There's plenty of like ridiculous snob audio stuff, you know, which is
Yeah.
about what equipment do you own rather
Yeah.
than what you do with it.
Yeah. No, that's good. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Not too much.
Good.
Um, it's yeah, no, I mean, mostly it's just if I've got stuff hanging over my head that needs to get done,
Yeah.
and I've had to, learn how to just carve out a little time for myself, even when stuff is kind of clamoring at the door.
Yeah. So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists, musicians are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Wayne, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, essentially, people don't like change,
Yeah.
you know, like on average. So anything I mean, people are more into change if they're in a bad situation. But if they're in a fairly decent situation, they got no reason to want change,
Yeah.
so they kind of resist it, and
Yeah.
even if it's seemingly not that much of a challenge,
Yeah.
even if it's just pointing out things.
Do artists have moral obligation?
Yes and no. I mean, you have a moral obligation to yourself to try to do right.
Yeah.
Um, I disagree that when people say you have to do a certain thing artistically, uh, and it comes from any circles. I grew up in conservative church situation, and it was always about, you know, music has to be communicating this thing that we're trying to, spread to other people. And you find that in whatever. You find that in political circles, any kind of circles where there's a lot of pressure to kind of uh, advance the agenda of whatever organization it is.
Oh yeah.
And to me, that's not, I don't feel an obligation to that necessarily.
Yeah.
Because that kind of subverts the artistic thing that's kind of ineffable.
Yeah. Well, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I think I'm more afraid of incorrect ideas.
I get that. Incorrect.
whether it's old or new. Uh, you know, because I mean, certain ideas can just become accepted and not necessarily rightly accepted, and
Yeah.
that can be new or old. I mean, you can just look in history and see what was accepted as quote unquote common sense,
Yeah.
and now it just seems ridiculous. Some of these things,
So
So now everybody wants to, you know, call on common sense, and there is no common sense. You
yeah.
know, common sense, when people invoke that, it just means that it's what they think.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, my wife is Japanese, so one of the things, she'll, you know, get bugged about something. It's just common sense. Well, it's actually common sense in Japan, but not here.
Not yeah.
So people have the tendency to feel like common sense is this grounded thing that everything else is built on, when it's actually a construct that can be fairly cultural specific, religious specific, you know, philosophy, specific.
Many things determine that. Wow, that was good. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
I remember very early, um, seeing a woman playing piano in church, and because I was so little, my eyes are probably about the level of the piano keyboard, right? Instead of looking from above it. And I remember seeing the keys going down, because if you're looking at the edge of the keyboard, it becomes like this little rectangle that goes down, because you're not really seeing the top of the
Yeah,
keys. And just seeing the patterns of that happening, when this woman was playing piano, somehow fascinated me.
that's pretty destiny. So what age do you think you are about at that?
I don't know, four, maybe
Four.
four or
Yeah.
five.
Yeah. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Well, again, it depends on the memory.
Yeah.
If it's a bad memory, it's a curse.
Yeah.
If it's a good memory, I mean, even a good memory could become a curse too, because if
Yeah.
you know you're past those good times or something, it can
Yeah.
be kind of depressing, even
Yeah.
though it was a happy memory.
Tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you and what was specifically that impact?
Well, there's a few things come to mind. different people. My father, uh, who was a minister and conservative Christian kind of denomination, and he was also conservative politically, but he was kind of he was thoughtful and kind of an intellectual more than was accepted in his circles. And he would actually change his mind about things instead of just being doctrinaire. Like he was in a small town in Washington where there was, probably hardly any, government officials other than maybe the sheriff that would drive through or something. And so he got called upon to help in various capacities. And one time he had to go assist the sheriff with a family where a guy had committed suicide by blowing his head off with a shotgun. And my dad had a shotgun because to scare away the birds and stuff from our vegetable garden. But after that, he said, I just don't think I need to have that gun in my house. And so even though he was conservative politically, he was, very much always like into gun control, which is kind of a signature issue to not be for if you were conservative. And to me, that's pretty impressive that you can actually just consider the actual value of stuff and make a decision rather than just going back to your the platform of whatever you're in.
That was beautiful, Wayne, because that's what I'm for: anecdotes, stories, tangents, because you really illustrated that. I could picture the whole thing. And that's the statistic is that's people commit suicides because there's a gun in the house. Why do you even have to have a gun in the that was
was
smart.
his whole deal. He just didn't want that around in there,
Yeah.
in the family,
Yeah. And you're gonna mention one more inside your immediate family?
Well, my mother, my brother, there's a few people. There's one other thing that was really impressive about my father is that we were in this during my high school years. We were in Imperial, California, which is down in the southeast corner below the Salton Sea.
Yeah.
Kind of farming community, very conservative. And he, it was almost kind of like out of a movie. There's like the one rich guy that like owned everything in the town, lived just outside of the town in a big house, and the rest of the town is middle class at the highest, and then down from there. And there's kind of like one of each kind of church. There's like a Catholic church, like an Assembly of God, and a community church, which is what my father was. And the old rich guy and his family kind of ran the church, but so at one point, a black family, because the town, 3,000 people, not that big, but it was, there was all kinds of racial groups, and a black family started coming to the church, and this old guy went and talked to them and said, shouldn't you go to your own church, across the tracks or whatever, because there's a little black church over there. And my dad stood up to him and called that out, and in fact brought in at some point another black family started coming there, and he ended up becoming a leader in the church.
Wow.
And that you can talk about, racial stuff, but it's more about like what you do,
Exactly.
And
He walked the walk. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So just briefly, what'd you mainly get from your mom and what'd you mainly get from your brother?
My mom was she was a school teacher, uh, mostly because there's wasn't a lot of money, so he needed to have another job. Um, but she was just open to
Yeah.
things, um, despite her background. I mean, I gave her a few records, and she would listen to them, and um, I mean, I took her to see Bill Evans one time at
Yeah.
Concerts.C.
Oh my God. That's why
And
my brother.
she had no background for jazz at all, but she was just open to things.
Well, I mean, taking your mom to see Bill Evans is like top notch. It's like my brother took my mom to see Taj Mahal once, and I was like, that is so cool. Okay. Now is your bro older or younger than you, your brother?
He's younger,
And
2 years younger.
what'd you mainly get from him?
Well, he's way smarter. He was a science guy and he wrote computer software and stuff. Um, but we lived together for a long time. Um, he was just he put up money for some of my records and
Yeah.
very generous and supportive. I mean, the family's always been very supportive. I mean, there was never any kind of rebellion
Yeah.
becoming the artist.
Yeah.
It was just something I was interested in doing, and they were always, the whole family was always very supportive. I've never really been that impressed with people that are just rebellious for the sake of being rebellious.
Yeah.
You know, the, if you have to be because of what's going on in the content, I mean, sometimes you just have to be, but then, people like self-destruction as a way of protest just never really made sense to me,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, you're lucky you had a supportive family. That's beautiful. Now, same question outside your immediate family.
Mhm.
Somebody who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Um, I can think of a few people. My jazz teacher in college, which I just did kind of private lessons. It wasn't in part of the college, environment, but I was in Santa Barbara, and uh, myself and people that we hung out with would go see this guy play piano at a bar up there, and got to know him. And he was just a great, great piano player. And I started taking lessons with him, um, but he would never teach me anything. We would just hang out, and even when I would ask him, because there was certain things that he did where, like, when there was no bass player, he would play bass lines with the left hand and stuff, and I was kind of interested in that.
Mm.
And he would just go, "Oh, you'll figure that out." And it used to be a little frustrating, but I found that he didn't want to give me. I mean, he showed me certain things, but it wasn't like he wanted to teach me everything he knew and make me
Yeah.
like a new version of him or something. And I don't know if that was. I don't think he did that with other people that I could tell. So he thought there was something there, I guess. But I learned so much from him about being a musician and how to. I mean, he taught me stuff about, like, don't get uptight when somebody criticizes you or somebody, just evaluate what they're saying. And then if it's true, try to do it. If it's not true, then you can just reject it, but don't, because sometimes people with, your emotion will, like if somebody says, I don't like what you're doing or don't do that, you're like, "Ugh," you have the tendency just humanly to kind of react
Yeah.
emotionally. and he kind of taught me is try to keep it about the music,
Yeah.
and and align yourself that way rather than just gut reaction.
It's really
And
good. Yeah, Andy Warhol says something similar. He goes, "Don't worry about what people think of your art. Just keep making it. Just keep playing your music. Don't, yeah. But it is he was teaching you also listen to it, process it, and it doesn't mean you have to agree or disagree. Actually, Jean Cocteau said it best. He says, whenever you make your first piece of art or your first big musical composition, and all your friends and family say, "Oh, that was really good, but do this." Take the criticism and exploit that for the rest of your career. Okay,
I
so
I should mention it. I should mention his name. His name was Art Lyons.
Art Lyons, yeah, okay, and that's Lyon.
Yes, S. Lyons. Yeah.
Lyons, very cool. So you were raised a particular religion. Do you pray?
Yes.
And if God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I guess mostly good job.
Yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Hard to say, but I mean, it seems like there's certain people that are, you know, that are just seem to be just evil.
Yeah.
Um, at their very core, and then there's other people that are just kind of, whether it's expediency or whatever, or their environment or the people that they're around can be just kind of led into things, you know. So I don't know.
Well, the real hidden question here, Wayne, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the Mob and the Samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK
Right.
said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, my approach is fairly non-confrontational anyway, just my personality.
Yeah,
So I'll have the tendency to just kind of try to lay low and get by,
yeah,
uh, rather than trying to create a confrontation.
yeah,
Um, so, I mean, I acknowledge that's, you know, if somebody's trying to foil me or whatever, but I mean, thankfully, I haven't really had too many situations like that. Uh,
Well, this guy, Nassim Taleb, said games were created to give non heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know we don't know. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Gregory Bateson says if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, whoa, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
well, I think it can work for. There's some people that you know have quote unquote turned their lives around, after something like that, and then there's plenty of other people that it just makes them bitter criminals.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it depends on the person themselves, whether how they respond to it. I don't think punishment really is more for the people doing the punishment, in terms of mentally, they want to feel like, I mean, there's this whole crap, in politics and world politics, where we're going to send a message to such and such a country by doing this, and it's like, it's completely bullshit. I mean, it's just, you're only sending a message to your own people to make you posturing like you're tough,
Yeah.
because that kind of stuff only just evokes enmity from the other people. They're not going to go, oh shoot, they're getting tough with me. I'm gonna roll over. Never happens, you know.
It's
So
actually,
a lot
yeah,
of the punishment stuff is about, people
yeah,
trying to make a point on the side of like, we're tough on crime,
yeah. The Punisher. I get that answer sometimes, and I always love to hear that. It's more about the Punisher than the person you're punishing.
Mhm.
So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
Because it's more, uh, it's exaggerated, but, and I don't mean that negatively. It kind of, in life, everything kind of runs together, um, with certain exceptions, like big events or whatnot in your life. But if you're sitting in a coffee shop and listening to a conversation at the next table, it's just kind of just goes on. But you see it in a movie where it's just in more relief, and
Yeah,
more concentrated.
yeah,
So, I mean, that also goes back to what I was saying about engineering and music. It's like, the longer I've been doing it, the more you realize how much of a craft it is to make good sounding records. And
yeah,
people, the general public has no idea. They just think, oh, I'm just listening to this and that's what happened.
yeah,
And it's just not, even from the very beginning of recording with one mic, it's where you put that mic. It
yeah,
wouldn't sound like that in the room, and now we've gotten used to hearing stuff that's well crafted, so you can hear everything, really well, and that's because of the craft that's been brought to it.
yeah.
And it just doesn't sound that way in real life. I mean, even now, like, one of my pet peeves is just how bad sound is in concerts and stuff. Like, the
Oy,
technology for PAs is unparalleled,
yeah,
but people just don't use it right, you know.
yeah, yeah. Wayne,
And so to me, it's like, it's about framing and
yeah,
concentrating things in art, so that you can it makes you notice the thing more
yeah.
than if in real life.
Yeah, you evoked two things I want to say really quick, and we finally can get into music and engineering. I saw Fred Frith talk once at a little lecture, and he was saying how Frank Zappa was one of the first people to use the studio as an instrument. That he was so into concentrating on the technology of it as well as the art and the form and the content. And then
Sure.
one of my favorites is somebody like Christian McBride says James Brown would yell as part of his song, "Engineer, turn me up." And it became part of the music. It wasn't like, "Oh, wait, stop the tape.
Yeah.
Could you turn me up?" So, what was the tipping point for your two things, your two callings, to be a pianist, pursue music, and to be an engineer? Where's your two major tipping points?
It's practicality. Um, it's it's hard to be an artist of any kind in this culture. You know, there's no path. Do A, go to B, go to C, go to D. It's you got to figure it out and just make your own way. You know, whatever art you pursue. Um, so I had back in college, I had bought a reel-to-reel tape deck, a couple of mics just to record my own stuff, my own bands and various things. And then I came to LA in 1978, and I started when DAT machines came out, the digital audio tape. It allowed people without a big budget to actually make, you know, record quality recordings. You know, before that, you'd have to really have a lot of gear because most people had cassette decks and stuff, but that wasn't really of a quality that you'd want to be putting out records. So I got a DAT machine, and then I was recording my own stuff, and then other people wanted me to record them, and that was stereo. So it was just live mixing to stereo. And then when I made money doing that, and I was successful in that realm just because I was a musician. So I knew it was mostly for jazz people because they would go into recording studios that were more rock oriented, and these guys just had no idea how to record jazz. Like somebody would show up, you know, with an acoustic bass, and the guy would call it a cello. Like you immediately knew that they had no idea what was going
Yeah,
on. But I did. So when I would mix these things live, I knew what was going to happen with the music, when the solos were going to happen, when they went back to the, you know, for the head and the out head and whatnot, so I could make these adjustments. So it helped me to know the music, and then I would make money doing that, and then I would buy more equipment, and then I just kind of stair stepped it by
yeah,
up to the point where I kind of just end up doing both, and
yeah,
I enjoy both. So it's not like really like a day job to engineer because it's
yeah,
still involved in the music, and
totally.
it also
But
helps because I can record my own self.
yeah, but I'm saying like age 4, you see that piano in the church to high school. Where is your, are your parents then go, oh, we want you to take piano lessons? Like, what are you listening to and doing study wise to be a pianist and a composer?
Right. Well,
Where's that calling sort of come in? Oh, that's what I want to do.
I made a decision in high school.
Yeah,
Um, I had taken piano lessons from when I was a kid,
yeah.
and I had an interesting piano teacher in high school who had me playing some Count Basie stuff and whatnot,
Oh,
as well as classical. Um, but jazz to me was not a, I mean, living before the internet, living, you know, out in Imperial, California, there's not, there's no place to listen to it, you
yeah.
know? And I was in, I also played trombone as well as piano. And I was in like the stage band, which was at that time, in the early 70s, they started bringing in these kind of quote unquote jazz things and calling them stage bands. And I played in that as well as in the regular band. But that to me, you know, that wasn't strictly like real jazz, you know, it's kind of
Yeah.
different. But, um, and to me, the thing that expanded my mind mostly at that point was, since there was no radio that would play any interesting stuff, I got on this company called what was it called? I can't remember, but it was a record club kind of thing where
Right.
they would they would send you a thing every month, and you could. It wasn't one of those kind of ones that were kind of scammy. It was like you didn't have to buy anything. They would just send this thing out, and you could choose if you wanted to and stuff. And I guess they did their own pressings, weirdly enough, but it was the same covers and everything. So I picked certain things. I mean, I picked King Crimson because of the album cover, because I had never
Wow.
heard of them. But
Yeah.
in the Court of the Crimson King with that big red face, I said, "Whoa,
Oh,
I gotta check that out." And that
and
record,
it delivered. The thing about that cover, Wayne, is the cover delivered the goods.
oh, for sure. And that really, I mean, that just blew my mind because there's also so many different kinds of music on that, from like really,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
distorted rock stuff to this floaty kind of improv stuff with
Yeah.
woodwinds,
Oh, yeah.
so it was quite a variety of stuff on there. And, you know, I, I ended up getting a lot of different things through that, and being able to listen to it, without having any kind of radio or anything that would turn me on to it. And then I realized early on that the whole sacred secular division in the church was just not true. It's just music.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was a kind of a thing that took me, uh, into a more expansive view of music. Um, then there was a youth group that came down from San Diego area and participated at our church. And there was a guy there who later became one of my closest friends named Sam Goldstein, who was a guitarist. And he really liked what I was doing playing piano, because he said, you're putting a little more, juice on it than the normal kind of church players. And he just had a whole lot more knowledge because he was, much up by the coast, so he had access to a lot of stuff. He was really into all the major kind of rock stuff, Cream and Led Zeppelin and all that kind of stuff. And then, so I stayed in contact with him. He ended up, he was a year younger than me. He ended up coming to the college that I was at. And, well, that gets ahead of it a little bit, but just to answer your specific question, when I was in high school, I decided I just want to be a musician. I'm going to
Yeah.
follow that at this point. There
Yeah.
was no, uh, and I also decided I didn't want to teach. I just wanted
Wow.
to be a musician, because teaching, I mean, I totally respect great teachers and I've had them, but it's not me. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people that just kind of revert to teaching because it's one way to make money being a musician. And I just said, I got to just do it the whole way. So I started as a music major in college. When I went there, uh, for like when I was still in high school, I went to the college on what they call college day, where you go
Yeah.
there and see what's going on. And there was a guy running like a pep band for the basketball game, that they were like playing Chicago,
Yeah.
jazz rock tunes and stuff. And it was great band. And I said, man, this is cool, you know? So I showed up as a freshman at that college, Westmont College in Santa Barbara, and he wasn't there that year. He had taken a year off. Uh, so the second year, so I played music with various people, mostly like folk rock stuff there.
Yeah.
And second year, he came back and was going to put another band together. That year, my friend Sam came to the same college, and we both auditioned for this group, and we got in. and we had a weekly gig at this kind of student coffee house on campus. And by that point, Sam had gotten really expanded in his music. Like he was into the Art Ensemble of Chicago and
Nice.
Anthony Braxton and all that kind of stuff. And when he came into the group, the guy that was running the group, John Rapson, who was a trombone player and a keyboard player, uh, he was mostly into kind of straight ahead jazz and then jazz rock stuff.
Yeah.
And then Sam kind of brought this whole thing of let's do some more kind of free stuff.
Yeah.
And then that group kind of became like an amalgam of that. So that was a very informative thing in our music. And then it also was part of kind of a informal collective of people that were uh, meeting around the art teacher there named Tom Soul, who was also kind of a renegade in terms of the whole college thing. And we learned more just hanging out with discussions, art and music and whatnot, discussions with him and people from different. It wasn't just musicians; it was like all kinds of different people, writers, um, as well as musicians and artists.
Like
And that became a
multimedia. Yeah.
yeah.
But
And we
Wayne,
all
I'm
supported each other, and it was
whoops. Oh, you froze up there. Let's see if you come back. So we're talking to Wayne Peet. You can go to his website, check out his music and his studio work, and we'll hope for the best here. Or this will. Oh, there we go. All right. Can you hear me, Wayne?
I'm back.
Oh, good.
Yeah, my internet connection just dropped for some reason. I just turned it
Yeah.
back on.
No,
Sorry.
those things happen, but that was cool. You really summarized that all well, and we could finally get into music. And so, my first question in that regard is: a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite: great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does what role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a Wayne composition? It's not a commission, it's just solely you writing
Right.
one of your compositions. What role does intention play?
It's a balance. I find that I'm writing a bunch of stuff right now because I have a concert coming up in May with my group, and I'm trying to write all new music. Um, a lot of times, it's right after I wake up. I'll have something that I was somehow was in the dream, and if I write it down quick enough, I can get it. Um, so it's in some ways it just comes to me. In other ways, it's me doing it. You
Yeah,
know, um, I try to be just open to that because it's definitely no matter what your intention, it's just going to get uh, steered in different ways uh, that feels like you don't have control. When it works well, you just get on a beam of what's going on.
I like that beam the imagery. But Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your listener when you're composing?
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, with the exception, I mean, I do movie music and stuff, and in those, and I play church gigs still.
Yeah.
Um, there's certain things that happen in uh, certain contexts, and I'm not confrontational enough to start doing Cecil Taylor stuff at a Catholic
At
church.
church. But I'm saying at this concert you have in May, you're not thinking the audience, but that's I appreciate what you're saying. And dude, McLuhan also says everything we invent extends some humanness, like a knife and fork extends our teeth, shutter and a camera extends our eyelid, and maybe even like non-tangibles, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. What does two things, your two main tools, what does the piano, the keyboard extend? What humanness? And then what does the studio extend? What humanness?
Well, the keyboard, I don't really. There's when it's working, it's just a unity, um, and most of the time, it's just like fighting yourself to get it, to get yourself in the flow to do it well.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. It's not just, oh, this is the extension of my thing. It's actually something you're fighting in some ways to make it work.
Yeah.
Um, because it's just, especially if you're trying to do something that's you know of interest, like I don't want to. I'm always trying to. I mean, there's a bad thing of people just trying to do something new just to do something new, because it's too self-conscious
Yeah.
and kind of shallow. But at the same time, I think if you're going to do it, you need to try to bring something of yourself to it.
Yeah.
So no matter what context I'm playing in, I'm always trying to throw in some stuff, that works in the situation, not like look at me, but just something that makes it interesting to me. And then hopefully, a lot of times people will notice it,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to make people notice it. If I'm playing like a church gig or something, I'm playing within that context, but I'm still trying to get a feel going and
Yeah.
some stuff, and some people will come up, wow, we really like your playing. And it wasn't like I was trying to get them to like my playing. I was just doing something that I would like,
Right.
and I'm not just going to town in the wrong context, like
Yeah.
when I'm playing in my own thing, like you mentioned, coming up, I can do whatever I want. There's no
Yeah.
limits there, you know. But if I'm playing like that Bob Dylan tribute gig thing, I'm not trying to just sound like the record, you
Yeah.
know. You put in like that song like a Rolling Stone, you got to play that organ,
Yeah.
dee doo doo dee doo, lick. But beyond that, you can play within that context and still kind of do, some things that are interesting as well to yourself.
To be creative.
That's the way I approach it. Now,
Well, that's beautiful that you can integrate both and that you have that range. You play a church gig or you play a Dylan gig or you play your own music. You have that range to be able to do that. But now for the studio, and you summarize it, I would say what the piano extends for you is the unity of yourself and fighting the flow. But I like you said you use the verb fighting. It's more all these musicians like Don Preston. I asked him all these questions and he goes, when you play music, don't think. And I'm like, yeah, right. How do you not think? It sounds good. Monk says that music is math. So you got all these Rolodex of licks in your
yeah,
head.
it's always a combination. I find like one of the things that I've done as an exercise practicing to try to not think
Yeah.
and just, just start playing.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of free improv anyway, so it's not like that's an issue. Um,
Yeah.
but sometimes when you think, it's a balance. If you're thinking too much,
Yeah.
because thinking is about planning, so
Yeah.
you're planning for the future. But the thing is, you're playing right now.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking too much, it kind of takes you off of the now too much. You
Yeah.
know?
That's Derek Bailey. I saw him play at McCabe's, and
Mhm.
he's like the most out guitarist ever, and he's really good at it. And or one of them, but
Yeah, sure.
he's like that kind of music is you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right. Yeah.
That's hard
And that,
because everybody, like you were saying, you said the word, Wayne, so well. Thinking is planning. Like, what am I going to do next after that? Well, what if I'm in this zone where I don't know what I'm going to do next?
that's when you just have to be open and yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, because I've done a lot of more free kind of stuff with the people that I've played with in LA, like Vinny Golia, Alex Klein, Nels Klein, Stuart Liebig, a whole bunch of people. And the people that are G. Stinson, people that are really good at free improv, it's amazing to play because you're right. I mean, it's you don't know what's going to happen next, and they're creating the form as they
yeah,
do it. Whereas, playing standards like in jazz, the form is there, the
yeah,
song form is there, and then you're doing stuff over it, which is great.
yeah,
But it's a whole different thing if you're making up the form as you're also making up what's the content of the form.
yeah,
And if you're doing it by yourself, there's a certain freedom there. But if you're doing it with other people, it's really about listening and finding that balance right at that pinpoint of moving into the future where you're hearing, you're doing, and you have to accommodate for the other stuff that's going on from the other players. You can't just blast through
yeah.
and not listen, because that's the worst thing is playing with people that don't listen,
Key,
and that
key.
applies to any kind of music.
Yeah, you really know it well. That's why you play with the best guys in LA, the best, free jazz guys of LA. You played with them all. It's really great. You just recited their names. In and I wanted to say, I asked people, who's better, Oscar Peterson or Art Tatum? Like, who do you like better? And the one guy goes, well, Oscar was a composer. And I'm like, well, everybody, I mean, people know Art's better, but he's playing standards. But in the midst of playing the standards, he's composing. So he's using that
Yeah,
framework. So, I know it's not a race like who's better, but it's just like a prompt again to jump off and get people to talk about Oscar
sure.
and Art, you know. So that's the thing is like how you define what is composing and what is improvising, and then how much are you relying on your past? Because you have, like I always say, this Rolodex in your head, you know.
Yeah, but if you're just running through your licks, that gets pretty obvious too. So you want to. Oh, this
Very
would be a
much
great
so.
place for 57A. You know.
I'm running through my legs. Okay. So now the thing about the extension, what humanness does the studio extend? So I mean that's basically your main tool. Let's call it the studio,
Yeah. Well, that's that's a great thing because I mean, you mentioned Zappa, of course, who's I was really into as well. Saw him play in the '70s. Um, uh, and of course, it goes back, you know, from Les Paul, doing overdub stuff, and then, through the Beatles in the late 60s
Yeah.
stuff, and then developed into the full-blown studio thing in the 70s.
Yeah.
Uh, and I started recording, as I had mentioned, just going live mixes to 2-track to a DAT,
Yeah.
and then I never had the money to get like really expensive stuff. So I got into multi-tracking when ADATs came out, which was digital 8 tracks, like on VHS tape. And then that opens up a whole world when you can actually multi-track and mix later.
Yeah.
And if you have separation, then you can punch in on certain tracks and create. And then it starts moving over more into sonic sculpture, analogous more to, painting or sculpture, where it's you're creating. I mean, music is a time art. It's in motion in time. It's not like a painting where it's just sitting there and you're looking at it. But these tools allow us to control the content more, kind of like,
Yeah.
a painter or a sculptor could. Um, so it definitely becomes greater. That's definitely extension of humanist. It's greater than what you can do just by just playing and recording.
Yeah.
You can create, even as a single person, you can overdub and make a whole a whole thing with you playing different parts,
Yeah.
which you couldn't do, in real life. Um, and then people will rebel against it and go like, "Oh yeah, but it's too artificial." Blah blah blah. But it's just like recording is artificial
Hello.
anyway.
you know,
So
you know what,
you go
Tom?
back
What
to the beginning; it's already artificial. So
it's
like at some
already
point
is.
they go like, now they're cheating. Before that, it was real recording. It's just like, okay, you know.
That's Tom Waits says my favorite line. He goes, "The best music doesn't want to be recorded." So, it's a cute line and it means a lot. But if you hide the mic and you're jamming with the Klein brothers, and you're just jamming, let's just jam, and the mic's hidden, then how do you know? I mean,
Yeah.
but anyways, what you said, sonic sculpture, was so heavy because Zappa said when he was in church, about 14, age 12, 14, he watched
Mhm.
the candles and the flame moved according to the way the singers were singing. So the choir sang and then the candle moved. And that's when he
Mm.
decided that what music is is air molecule sculptures. you're, you're
It's
sculpting
true.
air
You-
molecules, and
You're
when
moving
you
the
said
air. Yeah.
sonic sculpture in that thing of time. So the next question, Wayne, is simple: what's the function of music?
Well, I don't like that word function.
I love that. That's good.
Because that goes back to people, in various organizations wanting to make sure that your music is functioning
Yeah,
to promote whatever they're promoting. Whereas I think it's just a thing that exists and somehow humans just want to do it.
yeah,
I mean, from the simplest, just when, somebody walks by a thing, they'll, they'll tap on it,
yeah,
just to see what it sounds like.
yeah,
Um, that's the very basic thing. And then, you have all this history of stuff where it's kind of accumulated various types of making sounds,
yeah,
various types of ways of organizing it. It's just something. There's side functions where it'll make you happy if it's something that you like
Yeah.
and you hear it, but to me, it's not really about planning that. That's kind of just happens
Yeah.
in the best stuff. Because stuff that's trying to be functional always just kind of cheapens it. It's like Muzak or something. It's like, we're trying to make something that's relaxing here,
Yeah.
you know, or new age music or whatever. It's something that's kind of like the function is the main thing as opposed to what happens. Like playing with Alex Klein, who does a certain amount of just really floaty kind of stuff that could be lumped into kind of a new age thing,
Yeah.
but then he'll just blast into some really really loud thing, rhythmic thing, because he's hitting all these areas, and it's going to piss off the new age people, you know,
Thank God.
and the people that want the really intense thing are gonna, what's this all this boring like floaty
Yeah.
stuff going on here.
Well, that's exactly when I saw Derek Bailey. It helped me define what I think good art should fuck your shit up and make you go home and go, I could do that. So I go, I can do that, and I go home and stick needles, or like Fred Frist sticks needles
Yeah.
in his, and I play, and I goes, wow, it doesn't sound as good as Fred. And then, but it's
No.
the inspiration that they did something that you never heard or that's new. So it's a way of hearing newness. But there's a couple things you said. You might know David Moss, amazing drummer who became a jazz avant-garde vocalist too. When I asked
Mhm.
him this, the function of music, he says it's the sound of being alive. But Igor Stravinsky says he gave lectures. Music means nothing, and I've actually had people go, what's the function of music? And he goes, there is no function, sort of like you're hesitant of saying, I don't like that word function. But Mickey Hart, the Dead drummer, said, his book plan is a good book on music. He said it was to hit the logs to tell the tribe that they're coming to steal our food. So it was a communication tool. But
Well,
Norm,
that's functional,
yeah,
you know. But then you can't really have people improvising there because otherwise they're like, well, they're playing the logs, but I can't tell what they're saying.
but that's the other one I was going to say is my friend Norman Zamchek says, what's the function of music? And he said, to keep people from going insane.
That's a good one.
I love that one. But it
Well, I
is.
mean, to get back to that function thing, I mean, I do soundtrack music, and interestingly enough, well, not interesting, but it's just like the human thing for directors usually is to think in either or,
Yeah.
black and white. There's some music for this scene that'll work, everything else won't.
Yeah.
Which, 99 out of 100 times that's not true.
Yeah.
You can play a scene with any number of different music things, and it'll may play it differently, emphasize different,
Yeah.
responses and stuff, but there's no right or wrong.
No.
Um, and it's one of the problems where directors will temp music, and then they'll want you to write music, and then if it's any different than the temp, they'll go, oh, that's not right though.
Yeah.
you know and I was working with a guy that was doing some commercial stuff where they attempted with something they couldn't use because they'd have to pay for it, and they wrote something that was just basically the same vibe and the same thing,
Yeah.
and these people were going like, well, yeah, but your melody goes like up there, and the original one went down, and this guy's going like, I'm trying not to get sued here, you know and it's like, what difference does it make, like a slight melodic difference, when it's just the vibe of that groove, that
Well,
they were really, but
le- Yeah, Wayne, you set up the perfect Kubrick story where he put Ligeti in as the temp music, and then
Yeah,
what's her face didn't write whatever somebody the scorer of the track of the movie didn't write it, so Kubrick just left the Ligeti in, and then he
yeah.
never credited him, and then later Ligeti went, "Hey, dude, that's my music in your film. Cough up the bucks, dude." But there's a couple other things. Um, Betty Davis has that great story, which is kind of folklore. She says to the director, "I don't want Max Steiner following me up the stairs," meaning I'm Betty Davis. Let me show off
Right.
my acting chops without being enhanced by this music. And
Mm.
then eventually I had on my podcast the guy who wrote the book about Max Steiner. He says, "No, that's false. Betty loved Max Steiner. She sort of said something like, 'Cool it there,' but it makes it sound like,
Ah,
that, how is it enhanced?" And then one other quickie is um, Carl Stalling. When John Zorn released the Carl Stalling recordings, I said to
mhm.
people, "Have you ever watched a Bugs Bunny cartoon with your eyes shut?" Because literally, we grew up with Bugs Bunny and we weren't, I mean, we meaning in general, people weren't separating the sound from the actual watching of a cartoon. It was all one thing. We didn't go, "There's an
Yeah,
orchestra." Where you see that movie Bugs Bunny Superstar and go, "Here's the orchestra that played that music." And like, what? An orchestra
yeah.
played that music? And then it helped us realize how great, Carl Stalling and his collaborators were as
Oh yeah,
composers
stuff's genius.
on their own, but you couldn't separate them because it was so ingrained in our head.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Yeah. So, one thing on the function of music I'd love to discuss too is simply this. I learned from Carolyn Casey about biomimicry, and that's humans imitating nature to invent things. We looked in a water and we saw ourselves, so we go, "Well, we don't can't carry around a piece of water, we need a mirror," so they invented a mirror. It was like mimicking nature. Or the person
Mm,
who invented Velcro saw it in a plant and said, "Oh, I can make that."
mm.
So, I know it sounds stupid, but I'm curious your thoughts. Did we hear birds and whistling, and then we went, "Oh, we can whistle too"? Or did humans start humming and whistling and the birds imitated us?
I have a feeling it was the birds first.
Yeah, I know. That's what everybody says, Wayne. But it is, we have that in nature. I mean, music's
I mean, there's
natural.
certain birds like mockingbirds that'll pick up,
Well, that's what
stuff
I'm
that,
saying.
yeah,
But you said, "Hey, you walk by a counter and you hit the wood or
yeah.
something to hear the sound." That we have this obsession with sound, in the way it's constructed, you know,
And there's
not
definitely, I mean, there's an emotional response to it as well,
yeah,
Uh, so humans just enjoy that.
yeah. Well, I hope we can do a part two because we're running out of time here, and I got a million music questions. I guess we have a few more minutes. We can you go another 5 minutes?
Sure.
Okay. So, why is 4/4 time the most commonly used time signature in Western music?
Because we have two legs, two hands. So it's all kind of base two, left, right, uh, that kind of thing. Whereas three, that just feels more solid because it's like you're walking. Um,
Well, that's
whereas
funny.
three
Yeah.
three floats more because you're 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then if it's slower, you know, it's left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. So it doesn't, I mean, it still works, but it just has it floats a little more against our physiology, you know?
That's pretty cool because here's what I've investigated. Besides being intuitive and easy, 4/4 time might be is because it's in sync with our walking and marching, but
Yep.
it's also in sync with our heartbeat rhythm. What time is our heartbeat in, do you think?
I don't know. I have an irregular heartbeat, so I'm not the guy to ask.
But it is funny that people think that because here's Captain Beefheart, you know, Don Van Vliet.
Yeah.
He varied from the 4/4 time. He called it the mama heartbeat, and he said it was related to fascism. It's so fixative and hypnotic that it's dangerous to the heart. That disco is dangerous. He wanted a non-hypnotic music to break up the catatonic state.
Well, I use a certain amount of odd meters or breaking up the meters in my compositions usually. I
Yeah,
guess I kind of like to mess with it too,
yeah,
you know, keep it interesting.
yeah.
It also
And
is a little bit more surprising if you're just, you know, if you have a short bar at the end of a phrase and then it just jumps back in, it gives you this little lift, you know, that if you're just kind of waiting for the 4/4 to
yeah,
finish all the time, it just kind of goes, you know.
yeah. But it was sort of like what you were talking about, Alex, drumming. Is that what's called dynamics, where you mix meters or mix, I mean, really what I was going to go into was we could do in the Copeland thing is Aaron Copland says the four ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. So usually what I ask first, Wayne, is how do you describe what is tone color in non-academic terms?
Well, I mean, tone color doesn't really sound academic to me anyway. It's kind of like that's what it is. It's makeup of the sonic makeup of the particular sound is what makes a difference between hearing a same note on a clarinet or a piano
Right.
is tone color.
Yeah.
It's the same pitch, but it has different overtones. Which, but that sounds more scientific than tone color.
Well, someone said, it's temperature because color implies warmth or cool. And
Yeah.
it's just I'm curious your thoughts of the four ingredients that he articulates: melody, rhythm, harmony, and tone color. How do you know how to integrate the four? Do you have a preference? Is there any sort of thoughts you have on navigating those elements?
Well, I mean, a lot of times, I mean, here's what I'm doing, writing on these new things here. When I'm not around a piano or something, I just start writing the rhythms out, kind of roughly thinking of the melody going up or down, and then I get back in and start fleshing it out with the actual pitches and chords. So a lot of times I start with the rhythm because that's kind of the skeleton that everything else is hung on, you know, fleshed out on.
That's amazing. People rarely are able to tell me. Some people go, well, I'm a melody person or I'm a harmony person. And drummers don't always even say they're a rhythm person. But that's interesting. You're saying the rhythm
Well, they
is
all
this.
have to work. They all have to work together, obviously.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
it's not like I just always do it that way.
yeah.
But
But just to be able to articulate how those elements go, uh, how to integrate them, how to navigate them is helpful. So, Wayne, I really appreciate your time and energy. I hope we can do a part two when we get deeper into music. And there's a lot of other elements that you've delved into, and how important engineering is in the sound of music and not just the playing of music.
Sounds good.
All right. So I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, but I hope this never ends and we keep talking forever and ever. And hey, we got to hang out sometime. We live close by. Where's your concert at, by the way?
It's at the Open Gate Theater Concert Series in Pasadena on May 11th. It's at the Universalist Church on Orange Grove, right by the 210.
How cool is that? I look forward to it. May 11th. And they can go to your website and find out more information.
I don't update that kind of stuff on my
website. You're like all of us. They can go to Open Gate, probably. Open Gate's website.
Yeah, Open Gate Theater. Yeah.
Theater, yeah. Super cool, Wayne. It's really been a pleasure. I really learned a lot, and I thank you for your time and energy.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Okay.
Thank you.